Hi, I'm Brian Lord, president of Premier Speakers Bureau. Every Friday through the summer, we're doing free virtual Fridays to provide great free content to you through this unique time, and also to help you learn more about great speakers and virtual presentations. This week, we're excited to have leadership strategist and researcher Sara Ross. Sara is the founder and chief vitality officer at the leadership strategy firm Brain Amped. Sara's firm shares vitality-enhancing strategies dedicated to transforming how people succeed at work and thrive in life. Over the last decade, she's been studying, teaching, and coaching leaders in the neuroscience of emotional intelligence. Sara's presentation today is how to build emotional vitality and lead through uncertainty. We'll also be taking questions throughout and at the end, so please make sure to post your questions in the Q&A. So without further ado, here's Sara Ross.
Wonderful. Thank you. And you made it through my tongue twister of an introduction, Brian. So you get top marks there.
I try.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for joining me. And my goal is to keep this a little bit more interactive. So if you have a keyboard pushed off to the side, I actually want you to bring it a little bit closer because I want to hear from you on some of the things that we're going to be talking about. And as I was preparing for this, I was looking at, I do work in emotional intelligence, resilience, and energy management. I was thinking, what's the best spend of our time? And I came across a study that I think is valuable to share to kind of set some of the context of what we're talking about here. Let me just get this up and running. And it was a study that was done by Qualtrics, and it was conducted between April and March. So at the beginning of this pandemic, when everybody was sent home, 2,700 people, 10 different industries, and they surveyed people from all different levels within that organization. And they were looking at the impact on mental health and well-being. And here's some of the numbers they came up with. They found that 75% of people were feeling more isolated. 67 were experiencing higher levels of stress and anxiety. 57% greater anxiety, and 53% were feeling more emotionally exhausted. And as you look at these numbers, I think they definitely are startling. They're high. In fact, even as we're doing this, I've got the Q&A open here so I can hopefully see. I want you to just put your fingers on the keyboard for a moment and let me know, do you think those numbers are high right now as we are at the very end of May? Do you think the numbers have gone up? Do you think the numbers have gone down? I'd love to kind of see what you are experiencing. Are they up or are they down for you? Because I know that in the leaders that I have been interviewing for my research, the people I work with from an executive coaching perspective, as this pandemic has increased, there was actually an element of energy and problem solving at the beginning, but people have started to feel that these numbers are going up. And I'm seeing some answers right here, probably going up. So here's the thing. Although these numbers are startling, I still think there's good news in this because I don't think there's ever been a time that we've actually taken these numbers so seriously. And so if you're looking to see how to manage some of these things, there's no shortness of information. I mean, we know strategies to help us manage these. We know that self-care and self-compassion are so helpful in managing stress. We know that we need to sleep more, eat healthy, exercise, and connect with people. Those are critical for our health. We know that sending emails when we're mad is a bad idea. We know it's a worse idea to read emails from people that make you mad right before you go to bed. And we know that setting boundaries between our work hours and our life hours will only make us more effective and productive. And setting boundaries with our digital devices will allow us to be more present with the people we care the most about and who actually deserve the very best of us. The challenge is all of those make sense. And logically, we make the assumption that because we know these and because they're good for us, we're actually going to apply them. So when I was thinking about how to actually structure our 40 minutes together, I thought it would be most valuable to look at why we don't do the things we know we should, even though it makes sense. And yet, if we look at this through the brain science, it's actually not surprising at all. When we're in high stress environments, when emotions are running high, when energy is running low, when we are facing a tremendous amount of uncertainty, which is exactly what we are all in right now, our brain's designed for emotions to get the upper hand. And this matters because you'll see from the design of the brain, that means we process information emotionally first and logically second. So even though logically we know what we should do, there's usually an emotional component that's getting in the way of us actually applying that. And I think that's where it's most valuable for us to start. And as I was thinking about it, I was reminded of a story that I often share now. It's a story of flying. So when we could freely jump on planes, which I am looking forward to doing again. But I thought of this story. I was flying and I had a woman sitting beside me who was a very anxious flyer. She was very nervous. She'd actually only flown one other time and she'd never flown alone. And because I fly a lot, I know that I have good flights and I know that there are turbulent flights. And I feel that it is my duty to help reassure people when they are nervous. And I think if I'm totally honest, there's a little bit of ego that's involved in it. It's like that badge of honor to not get freaked out when there's turbulence. And you always know the other people who fly a lot because none of us want to look like we're unsettled by anything. So we're flying and it's bumpy and turbulent, unfortunately. And she'd look at me and she's like, "Is that okay?" And I'm like, "Don't worry about it. Totally normal." And it got a little bit bumpier, I'll be honest. And so the pilot comes on and says, "I'd like everyone to buckle up. Flight attendants, I'd like you to take your seats." So the flight attendant walks by and she looks at, and the woman beside me looks at me and she says, "So is that okay?" And I was like, "Don't worry about it. That's so normal. The pilot just wants to make sure that everybody's safe." The flight attendant walks up the aisle, takes her seat at the front, buckles in. And I'm not joking, like less than 5 minutes later, our turbulence turned into a downdraft and our plane dropped. And I don't know if there's anybody out there, like truly put your fingers on the fingertips. If you are a nervous flyer or you've ever experienced one of these situations, it does not matter how often you fly. This is totally unnerving. The poor woman beside me, she grabs my arm and I know my facial expressions did not help whatsoever. But it's what happened next. It's what happened next, because all the people sitting on the aisle, we all did the exact same thing. We all did this. We all looked up the aisle. And who do you think we were actually looking for? So as you're sitting on the other side of the screen from me, perhaps you're thinking, "Oh, the pilot." No, the pilot's behind closed doors. We can't get any information from the pilot. Who we are actually looking to get information from was from the flight attendant. Now, unfortunately, the flight attendant had a death grip on the side of her chair and her face was pretty much this. And so I looked at the woman beside me and I'm like, "I don't know if this is going to turn out too well." But here's why I think this is such an important story. It speaks to what leaders are experiencing right now. And what leaders are experiencing right now is all eyes on you. We know from the data that when leaders are leading through crisis, their message is amplified. The people in the seats are trying to decode every single facial expression. We're trying to figure out how you're responding on those video calls. We're reading into every single thing. I call this I apologize. Let's see if I can get this up again. I call this the megaphone effect. And the reason this is so important to recognize is because as leaders, when you feel like you are always on, you actually are. And as people in the seats, when you feel like you're tired because you're always checking in to make sure everything is okay, you are tired. And this dynamic is going to be really important for us to recognize what it means to actually raise our emotional intelligence, which I will speak to, and raise our vitality quotient, which I will speak to. And so even as we start going through this, it's important to go back to the end of this story, because as I was getting off the flight, I walked by the flight attendant and I said to her, "Well, that was pretty scary." And she says, no big deal. It was okay." And I'm walking away and I'm thinking to myself, like, well, then somebody should tell your face, because your face told an entirely different story. And then as I allowed my passive judgment to go, I recognized what the flight attendant was actually trying to do was to be positive and reassuring. The challenge is it actually did the opposite. And this is the second layer of pressure that I think leaders are experiencing right now. It's how do you actually effectively balance being positive and confident and calm, but also connecting in a way that's open and honest and authentic. And we're going to talk about how to most effectively do that. So in our time, what I think is going to be helpful is to use the science of the brain as the foundation to build from. And what we're going to do is we're going to look at how does that brain design impact the way we engage in virtual environments. In fact, understanding how the emotions, recognizing them and managing them, will help decrease what I call digital depletion. And then on the flip side of that, look at what are the skills, strategies, and environments we need to create to make it safe, to be clear that this isn't a suggestion, but it's an actual priority, that we need people to be taking care of themselves. And that's what I call building our vitality. It's the emotional intelligence and vitality quotient together, but that's going to be the distinction and differentiating factor that I think leaders need in order to be successful, not only for their organization, not only in leading their teams, but to actually come through this in a way that they're stronger versus drained. So let's keep ourselves going on this. I want to hit the brain science for a moment. And I think it's helpful just to give a high level impact of this. And my husband always says I talk about the brain too much, but I think it's valuable here. So I'm going to get into some details. So when you think of the brain, we can think of the brain in these two systems. The brain's super complex. It's always working together, but only one of these systems can be in the driver's seat. And it's helpful to understand this because that's what drives our behavior, our responses. That's where emotions come into that equation. So we have our thinking system and we have our emotional system. When our thinking system is this prefrontal cortex is sitting in the driver's seat, it allows us to prioritize and strategize. This is the part of our brain that helps us tap into that experience and expertise. This is the part of the brain that actually helps us manage our impulses because it's connected to big picture, future consequences, our values. So if we make a decision now, we're considering how that will impact people downstream, how that will impact our work upstream. It's what allows us to empathize. But here's what's really important. This part of our brain fatigues with excessive use. The more it's on, the more tired it gets. Now, put that in relation to our emotional system, which is a beautiful system. It just gets us into a lot of trouble from a workplace perspective. This emotional system, the more we use it, the stronger it becomes, the faster it's able to react in any given situation. And so this part of our brain is responsible for keeping us alive. Great. What that means is information streams through this emotional part of our brain first. It's triaging and looking for any potential threats, real threats to our survival, but also threats to our comfort and social connection. It's looking for things like, do I feel respected? Is my status dropping? And am I at risk of failing in this situation? Are relationships at risk? Am I being judged in this situation? Do I have control and predictability in how the future is going to unfold? So you can, even as I describe that, you can appreciate that this emotional system is regularly getting triggered right now. And that's the thing. When it is reviewing this information, if it finds anything it finds triggering, it halts it there. It initiates that fight, flight, and freeze reaction. Cortisol, one of those stress hormones, floods our system, and it actually starts to invade this prefrontal cortex and chemically shuts down the ability for those synapses to work effectively. And you will know if this has happened. In fact, let me give you a quick example. I shared this with Brian earlier. This is my beautiful camera. that no longer works, that was supposed to be the camera that went with the entire setup for this presentation. And last night, because I was trying to be super careful, I wouldn't run out of batteries, I used a battery adapter and it fried my computer. Well, not my computer, my actual camera, excuse me, it fried my camera. The minute it happened, you know, this is a trigger to that emotional system, my brain shut down. My response was literally to basically cry, go out to my husband and say, well, that's it. There's no way, I cannot do this tomorrow. And my husband looks at me and he's so curious. He's like, but you have a computer, right? I was like, I do. But in that moment, when that emotional system is triggered, when our prefrontal cortex shuts down, we can't think effectively. It actually disconnects us from the future consequences, and it amplifies all the potential negative in the present moment. It's what makes us feel overwhelmed by stress. Now, the second part that makes this challenging, that's going to go right in alignment with that megaphone effect that I shared earlier, is that this part of our brain, because it's meant to keep us alive, it has this negativity bias. It would rather be safe than sorry. So take all of this brain science, and if we want to see how this is influencing us from an emotional perspective, an energy perspective in a remote environment, let's look at email. Email is something that we are using an awful lot right now. We used it a lot before, but it is a huge element of how we are communicating with people, because for most of us who used to work in an office, we now are working from our homes, and we can only be on so many calls at any given moment. So here's what the research says. The research suggests that when you send an email, the recipient will read it one tone more negatively than you intended. I want you to really think about that. One tone more negatively. So if you send what you think is just a not neutral update email, that recipient is going to be like, okay, I know, I've got that information. Now think about what also happens with email. If you send an email and you're frustrated and you want to let someone know you're frustrated, my gosh, you will be lucky if it's only one tone more negative. And this is where the brain science comes into play, because when we're in an eyeball to eyeball conversation, we have body language and tone and context. We have information. But when we're screen to screen, we're missing that tone. We're missing that information and body language. And so what our brain naturally does is it reads it more negatively. The challenge with that is that the minute it starts to read it more negatively, it amps us up to want to respond more negatively. In fact, even just let me know, and so that I'm not the only one who has done this, I'm sure everyone who is working at home, whether you are working at home with your partner, roommates, even if you don't have somebody at home, you have probably received an email at some point and felt it absolutely necessary to go out and reread that email to somebody else in your house. Now, if you've been on the receiving end of this, guaranteed the tone they use is probably far more negative. And as you're sitting there as the observer and you're listening, you're like, I'm not sure that's what they meant. But this brain design creates an environment for emotions to flare up. And it makes sense why. If you think about the last time you received a crummy email, because we've all received a crummy email, you get that email, your heart starts pounding, that emotional system kicks in, you are in fight mode, your fingers start tapping out on the keyboard and you hammer out an email. And then you want to hit send, but that prefrontal cortex, it's still doing its job. And it like whispers in your ear. It says, you should save that to a draft. And when we've got the capacity, maybe we send it to a draft. But when we're really mad, we're like, no, I want to send it. And then that voice gets a little bit louder and says, you should walk away from your computer. And you're like, I know I should. I know this. And so you walk away from your computer and you come back 15 minutes later and you open that email back up and you look at it. And if I was standing right in front of you, I'd ask you if you'd hit send. And I am pretty sure 95% of you are like, send? No way, delete. That's a huge response for most of us, but there's probably one that's more common for each of us. We start rereading the email and we edit it. We start softening the edges. So if we put this all together to see how our emotions start to swell in a remote environment, think about it. When we first get that email, who are we thinking of? Ourselves, right? We're thinking about ourselves. Our emotional system is meant to disconnect and focus on us. With some time, and as cortisol starts to recede from our brain, we go back to that email, and when we start editing it, now we're thinking about the other person. And so even just recognizing how this comes into play allows us to manage our virtual environments more effectively. For leaders, this megaphone effect is so potent, because when we don't have an opportunity to kind of meet up face to face to clarify things, it starts to build emotional residue. And so now if you're a leader and you're sending emails and it's like, hey, I'd like to meet tomorrow, I put in calendar invite. You get on the phone with them the next day and they're stressed and they're worried and they ask you what's wrong. And in your mind, you're so confused. You're like, nothing, I simply wanted to check in. But for them, remember, they're reading into every single message. This negativity bias is infusing it with a negative context. We start to feel paranoid with every situation. And so putting boundaries in place, helping people manage this environment is so incredibly critical. Letting people know times that are appropriate to be emailing, letting people know and abiding by the fact that emailing in the evening is not something that's expected. And if you need someone in the evenings, call them. The more certainty our brain has, the more this emotional system can start to disengage. It's always on and anticipating things. So if we're always looking at our email and trying to manage what might be coming in, and we're doing it because we're afraid that if we don't, we might look like the person who's not committed. We're afraid if we don't, we let something fall through the cracks and our job's at risk. Which is why we're not following the boundaries that we know are best for us. Then this gives us very little time to actually allow cortisol and the chemicals of stress to recede from our body. So leaders, this is so huge, but I want to be clear, it's just not all on the leader's shoulders. As individuals, when we actually recognize that this is going on, it's important for us to take control for ourselves. Susan, I have just blanked on her name, which is my emotional system kicking in. The writer of Emotional Agility, gosh, it will come to me when we're done. The writer of Emotional Agility, she says, in any given situation, there's a thinker and there's the thought. And in all of those situations, we have the opportunity to choose who's in control. We can choose to be in control, because sometimes this is more habit than it is anything else. And if you are in doubt, I actually want to see from people, how many people at some point have texted somebody in your house while you were also in your house? If you have, I want you to put your fingertips on the keyboard and give me a yes or a no. I won't judge you. I won't judge you, of course. Thank you. I see somebody's anonymous and doesn't want to genuinely tell me it's them. We've done this. And maybe we've done it when we are working from home, and we've done it because we don't want to interrupt their work. But I'm guessing we've probably done it outside of this pandemic. And when I share this story, I remember I was at a conference one time and this woman comes up and she's like, I just need to explain why. Because the point is we are so attached to our devices. And I said, no, but you don't have to explain anything. My point is just to say, what's our relationship to our devices? And she's like, no, it's really important to understand. She said, we have 2 young kids, and I was watching a movie with my husband. We just got the kids to bed. I was sitting comfy on the couch. He got up to get a glass of water. He asked me if I wanted a glass of water. And I said, no, I don't really want a glass of water. So he went to the kitchen to get a glass of water. And then I realized I kind of want a glass of water. And so I didn't want to yell down the hallway and wake up the kids. And I just gotten comfy. So I thought, I'll just text him, hey, I want a glass of water. And I was like, cool, no problem at all. Here's what I find fascinating. Your husband left the living room and went to the kitchen, and he took his phone with him. Why? because he's worried that he is going to get stuck and stranded in the kitchen, and the only way to get out will be like, SOS, I need to have support to get out of the kitchen. We are hugely connected to our devices. And so recognizing what boundaries we can put in place, not because we need to just give our brain a rest, but also because we need to put some control in place. And when we feel like we're in control, our emotional system actually starts to calm down way more effectively. I love this. A poll just got put up for me. And so how many people have texted inside the house? Let me just share those results. 87% of people are saying yes. So I know you are not alone. So we put these things in place to make sure we can more effectively manage this energy. And when we recognize that, then we can also start to say, what does it mean to more effectively manage our energy in these situations? So I want to flip it to the second side. And I want to look at, what do we do to create environments where people feel safe enough to not answer email at all hours of the night. They feel safe enough to be honest that they're not feeling as productive as they are, which out of everything we've just talked about makes perfect sense. Not only are we stressing about our work, our cognitive system, our emotional system is highly taxed right now, right? We're worrying about also if we are homeschooling our kids in an effective way. We're worrying about elderly parents, perhaps, whose health is at risk. And perhaps some of you are actually dealing with the health ramifications of the virus, and worse yet, some are actually dealing with grief. And so in order to actually start to have some self-compassion and take care of ourselves in an effective way, I'm going to go back to that megaphone effect and show leaders and share with you how leaders can create an environment where that starts to happen more effectively. And if we're going to do this, we need to figure out how to check in with people. And it starts with simply asking. And I know that sounds highly simplified, but intentionally picking up the phone, getting on a video call, and checking in with the person. This is not the same as checking on the person. Often, most of the time, what we end up doing is we call to check in on work, and then we check in with the person to make sure they're okay. But what ends up happening is the majority of the attention ends up going to the work. So simply ask how people are doing, even if the answer is then fine, or we're all good, figuring things out. It's a little bit hectic. Even if somebody doesn't want to share any further, the data shows that simply the act of asking people raises the level of supportiveness and has a positive impact on our well-being. And so it becomes also important to figure out how to perhaps dig into that conversation in a more effective way. And so I have this tool, and if you'd like at the end, I can share my email. I meant to remind Eric of this, and you can simply email Sara at sarajross.com, and I can send you a document that covers this entire tool. I'm just going to give you a little introduction to it. It's called a KVI tool, a Key Vitality Indicator tool. Just like our KPIs, where we're checking in on performance and making sure we're on track, a KVI tool does the exact same thing. And so to make things a little bit easier, I'm going to just pull it up for us here, and I will go right to it. Give me a moment. And this is composed of 5 questions. And these 5 questions are simply looking at 5 critical buckets that contribute to our overall sense of health and well-being. And not surprising, emotional health, mental, physical. And then the other 2 categories are, how clear are people on the purpose that they're serving, the priorities and the expectations you have for them? And do they have the resources to be able to do that successfully? Those 5 things, we can break them into 5 different questions. How focused and present are you feeling for mental? How open, calm, positive are you feeling? How's your energy? Are you feeling energized or are you feeling depleted? And then the last two questions I already shared. Do you feel clear on what's expected of you? And do you feel supported? And do you have the tools, the resources, the environment required in order to do that? And the really powerful thing about this is when people feel overwhelmed, when there is so much going on, we actually aren't very good at identifying what the cause is. This allows us to break things down for people and to see where they can actually take action to raise this. In fact, it might be valuable. I call this, serves as a very simple stress temperature taker. You can actually open up a meeting with this. Now, I do suggest that if you've never asked questions like this, if you pick up the phone and you're like, how focused are you feeling today? Is your energy good? That is going to do nothing but kind of trigger those emotional systems. So share with people. These are the buckets that we need to be taking care of on a regular basis that are going to be decreased by our stress response. So then the power of recognizing this is if we have this structure to use, how do we actually get people to share their real answers? Because much of the research I'm doing right now on psychological safety, people are more afraid now to share how they're actually feeling, knowing that jobs are at risk. And so there's a couple of things that we can do, you can do as a leader and as an individual to more effectively create an environment where people can open up. And the first thing to creating some of these psychological safety is when you ask these questions, share with other people your experiences and how you're handling things. This is be vulnerable and be open. Remember that experience with the flight attendant. If she had actually said to me when we were getting off the flight, if she had said to me, yeah, that downdraft totally caught me off guard. We've been through those before, but every single time it freaks me out a little bit. I probably wouldn't have thought any further about the conversation. I would have felt connected, but it wouldn't have stood out in my mind as being inauthentic. So when we can actually show people that they are not alone in things, often we feel more willing to open up. Number two, I think when this finishes, one of the defining factors of leaders and organizations who are going to come out of this, it's hard, but are actually going to come out of this stronger, are going to be the leaders who actually lead with empathy. And so the challenge with empathy and creating an environment where you can empathize with people is, in order to do it, you first have to develop it before you can display it. And when I say that, what that means is you need to be open and present in the conversation. You need to ask questions and then just listen to people, help people feel understood. Because when you do that, what's really powerful is you don't actually need to be the person who solves it. In fact, I think this is one of the biggest reasons there's such a high volume of emotional exhaustion among leaders right now. I've seen so many well-intentioned leaders who come in and mix up what it means to empower somebody and lift somebody up versus take on everyone's problems, rescue them, and carry them through this experience. Because when you are taking on everyone's problems, not only is that not sustainable, not only does that mean that you have to be involved in everything, you have to be in every meeting, you have to be a part of every decision, you have to answer every single email. That's not sustainable. That's exhausting. That pulls from your chances and opportunities to actually take care of yourself, disengage and rest, which is what we want people to do. But it also leaves people feeling dependent and helpless. And if our brain struggles with uncertainty, the feeling of being stuck and having no power or control in a system is so hard for humans. And so this idea of just being able to reach out and connect with people and empathize with people is a key element of what we do. In fact, we're wired to connect. I came across this study because I think if anything that this pandemic is going to show us, it's showing us how important these relationships are, not only to us working effectively, but to us actually having higher levels of mental health and well-being. And the study I came across was fascinating. And it looked at when people were put in a position where they were knocked off balance, and they had the opportunity to either grab onto the hand of a person standing beside them or a handrail attached to the wall. 8 out of 10 times, people reach for the hand. We reach for the thing that, even if it's not the logical response, the emotion of connection drives us. And so the more we start to create that environment, the more effective we can be. And leaders use that megaphone effect to create the most amount of psychological safety. Role model what you want your people to do. The kindest thing you can do for yourself is to take care of yourself. But when you start to build that into conversations, when you ask people what they're doing to manage stress, when you're sharing how you're managing these things, people pay attention to that. You give people permission to do that more effectively. In fact, I found it fascinating. Cisco last Friday asked their employees to take last Friday off. So they had a super long weekend in the US to help kind of decompress from all of the constant stress that people are experiencing. And at the end of the day, when you give people, you use the structure and you give people an opportunity to get clear on what's going on for them, you can challenge and empower them to do things to make things better. Because when it's not, I've seen too many people who mistake being tired for being incapable. But when you know what's contributing to this feeling of being overwhelmed, that puts control back in our hands. So as I am closing up here, I know it's the top of the 40 minutes, I thought it would be fun to share a video that I suspect many of you have seen. It made its rounds on social media, but I think it beautifully speaks to the experience that people are having right now. So I'll quickly do this and share it.
Bring it up hard and bring it down fast.
Hard and fast. Let's go, boy.
Well, fall, you gotta stay on your feet. Come on.
Phoenix, go straight through. Back up.
Make it fight yourself. Good one. Now hit it hard. Hit it with the heel.
Come on, Phoenix.
Hit it with the heel. You're not listening. Hit it with the heel. Yes, you can do it. Come on. Yes, you can do it. But you gotta do this now. Look at me. You have to hit it hard, though. You cannot hit it light. You have to hit it hard. Go.
Phoenix.
That's not hard. You touch it.
You can do anything, boy.
You can do it. You can do anything. Come on. Hit it hard.
Okay, so if I'm totally honest, perhaps one of the reasons I show that is because it also makes me smile. And for every person on the other side of the screen, at some point throughout this pandemic, and guaranteed after this pandemic, every single one of us will be playing one of those roles. Whether you are the person, the coach, or the leader who has to believe in their people more than they actually believe in themselves, whether you are the people cheering those on, whether you're the person who goes up and literally needs to pick someone up. And where I think we've all been, we all have these boards in front of us that seem impossible to get through. And if you take anything from this entire talk, here's what I want you to take. This is tough. I want you to walk away and balance granting yourself grace, because it's hard. Mistakes are going to be made, and the kindest thing you can do is to care for yourself. But balance granting yourself grace with holding yourself accountable. You know the science. You can work against the negativity bias. You know the value of putting strategies in place. You know that you will make mistakes. Hold yourself accountable to learn from those and then let them go. Because I think when we all do this together, we don't just get through this, we actually get stronger. Grant grace, hold yourself accountable, and thank you very much for your time with me. I'll pass it back to you, Brian.
All right. Well, thank you. Thank you, Sarah, for sharing that message. I got a lot out of it and really appreciate it. We're talking about some of the things you were talking about back here, kind of off stage. So
don't send those messages at night.
And anyway, so what I'd like to open it up now for, we do have a time for
Great.
a few questions. So definitely you can see the Q&A function there. Go ahead and post that. And Sarah, oh, well, someone just say, Paula Tom saying, amazing. Thank you, Sarah.
You're welcome.
So another question that's coming in here is, if you're not as stressed by this as others, what's the best way to relate to those who are?
Gosh, I love this question. Admittedly, as I was preparing for this, I did not have to find things to put in. I spent all my time taking things out. And this was one of them. Empathy. There is this, and I actually have it on my desktop as a reminder. There's this little thing that went through social media. It's these two dogs standing in mud. And it says, how deep is the mud? And there's a little one and the mud's right up to his chin. And there's a big one and it's just this far up his legs. And it's how deep is the mud? It depends who you ask. And we're all going through this differently. So I think the value here is to recognize, I've gotten this question as well from people whose businesses are doing fantastic. Like that there is actually success being found in this situation and dealing with the guilt around that. So I think both of those are interesting. Empathy is recognizing and being open that other people are experiencing something and it's different than what you are. And if you can be a sounding board for them, that can be incredibly powerful. In fact, if I can just very quickly share a strategy that I think is helpful as you're trying to support people, kind of the most empathetic thing that you can do is meet them where they are and give them what they're actually looking for. So a strategy I often share is ask people, like, what can I do in this conversation? Do you want me to just be a sounding board? Would you like advice? Or are you looking for me to help kind of challenge your perspectives? Because I think a part of it, sometimes when we're the ones overwhelmed, we don't even know what we want and we don't realize how much that's overwhelming us. So I think balancing support and empathy and empowering people to recognize what they can do and meeting them where they are is probably one of the best things that you can do. And remember, emotions are contagious. So if you are the person who's the calm one in the boat, that is contagious also. So use that as a way to help bring down the energy that other people, emotional energy that people might be experiencing.
Great. All right. So next question here. Can you give us a technique for identifying the reason for your stress when it's unknown? And that's from Karen Bergen.
Yeah, we need another 40 minutes, Karen. So if you genuinely, start with that KVI tool, is it kind of this mental overwhelming? Is it this emotional kind of fear, paranoia, anxiety, that kind of physical, like you are actually depleted? That at least starts to give some context. But I think the other side of that is, what are all the things that are going on that if you were sitting with a friend and said, okay, tell me what's stressing you out, like actually write those things down. Because when we get caught overthinking and we stay here, we actually don't make sense of things well in here. Research shows that when we actually put pen to paper, and that's different than typing, we actually start writing down, things start to clarify for us. And I'll share one other thing. Our brains, when we kind of talk about that megaphone effect, our brains are constantly kind of filtering information through three key filters. How will I look in this situation? Like, is it a concern of like status, competence? Will I be able to be successful with my current skill set? How will I look? How will I look? How will I fit? Is it a relationship piece? Am I still part of something that can add value? And how will I fare? Fare is the outcome certain? Am I worried about that? If you can actually start to look at the things that are running around in here and put those through those filters, that might actually help you recognize what some of the base of that is. And then shoot me an email, because there's a lot more than that, but that's a good place to start.
Great. And last question here. How do you write a nicer email? Or are there any positive triggers to use?
Okay. I think I forgot to share this. I did. So here, thank you for the question. Here is, I think, a strategy that the world needs right now. Get a Post-it note, use a Sharpie, put this on your computer. First of all, read one tone more positively. Every time you get an email, remember, we read it one tone more negatively. Read it a tone up every time. Because even doing that, I know you're asking how do you write it better, but if you're starting from a place that's more positive, then you tend to write more positive. But then, let me be real. If you are worried about writing a negative email, and you know someone's going to take it bad, and but you're a really good writer and you're looking for like the technique that won't trigger their emotional brain, I have very bad news for you. There is not one. The best thing you can do is pick up the phone, add that body language. If it's in video, the context, the tones and inflections, no matter how perfectly you write an email, it is going to be perceived in a tone negative. And so if you have to write it, then have something set up to check in with that person also, if you possibly can. But make sure you actually are starting from a place that's more in alignment with realistically what you may have received initially.
Great. All right. So thank you, Sarah, for next week, for those watching. For Premier's free virtual Friday, Disney veteran Simon T. Bailey will present on Shift Your Brilliance, Lead Differently. You can actually go to premierspeakers.com/free right now to register. That's up. Thanks again to everyone for joining us for this free virtual Friday. And Sara, as always, thank you so much for delivering this presentation, for sharing all this great information with everyone watching.